So part two of my tractor modifications are underneath, and it involves this bent plate, which is 3/16 thick, 12 inches wide, 18 inches long, and bent at a 45 along the edges like that. So that is for protection of the oil pan. When you bring a tractor into the woods, and I have seen videos of this, and I knew I needed to do it, and I did it back here, which is protect the vital components, because you're going to be running over rocks, stumps, sticks. So I protected the fuel tank with a 1/4-inch plate steel, and I protected the hydraulic valves for the front end loader, which are up there, with 1/4-inch plate steel. And the rest of it, the transmission is pretty robust, not much to catch. So what I had thought with the oil pan is that it is probably 3 to 4 inches higher than the back, and the axle is lower than that. So I thought that was relatively safe, and it may be. But I did have a close call, because right up here is the fan and the fan belt, and I had a stick make its way up there, and I could hear it in the fan, and it knocked the fan belt off the pulley, and I smelled rubber burning. Luckily, I didn't damage anything. I was able to put the belt back on, but it did teach me that I do need to protect this area, close up this opening, and while I'm at it, protect the oil pan. So since we're down here, one of the reasons I got a Kubota, I looked at John Deere. One of the major reasons I went with the Kubota is the way the axle is mounted on the front tire. So you'll notice the axle is actually on the upper half or upper portion of the center line of the wheel. It does not go in the center line of the wheel like a traditional, say, four-wheel drive truck that just has universal joints. This actually has a ring gear that goes around the edge, and a spur gear there that goes down, and this is what drives the wheel, which is a spur gear there and a ring gear here. So it allows them to put the center line of the axle higher up, so you gain more clearance. And that forces this front drive shaft up. Interestingly, they had to sort of cradle it around 2 drain lines for the oil pan. But so more clearance. The wheels turn a lot sharper than they would with a conventional universal joint, and the front drive axle is much higher up and out of the way. So I'm going to be able to protect all this basically from here back to here with this plate. How I plan to mount the plate is the angle will come up here, and I'm going to mount it here with a single bolt and a single bolt here. This is the frame for the front end loader, and these bolts attached to the frame of the tractor. So it's just going to be 10 millimeter, roughly 3/8, 7/16 size bolts in there. And I'm going to put a piece of angle iron that'll rest up against here. So if something does come up here, it's not relying on the bolts to hold it in place. It'll actually rest up against the angle iron. The bolts are really just to hold it in place, but the angle iron will provide the strength. So we'll see what that looks like here in a bit. In the meantime, I will use my 4-jack and this and put it up in place and mark out some mounting straps. So that is approximately where I'm going to put it. I have some 1.5 wide 3/16, which is the same thickness as the plate. Then I'm going to weld on here, probably attach it here, and back here before this flares out, so I have sort of the same plane to mount it onto. So I'll have to bring it out, bend this up a little bit, and then a mounting hole there and a mounting hole there. So I'll figure out the length to cut these into and figure out where to bend them. So, see how close I got this. That's 15. It's almost 15. So this one appears right. 17.5 is the distance that I need, and this one is 18. So, a couple of these will have to shift. And with all 4 feet sort of hitting equally, should be about 17.5, which it is. So that seems to be a good place to start. Everything is relatively square. So I'm going to tack these in place and we'll put it up there, see if it still fits. see if that's sitting okay. So it does keep this exposed, but it does have a guard. I think I'm not sure if it's even just a plastic guard. I think that's minimal risk. And over here, the fan is in there. There's a couple hoses there, but that's just the battery compartment up there. So I think this is, so I think that's a pretty good placement. Maybe get a bit more space between that. But right now I'm just fitting it so I can weld those tabs. Finalize the location with holes yet, but I think that'll fit. So I can weld these completely on, and then we can mark and drill the holes. So I've got it positioned where I want after I welded the tabs completely on. I thought I was going to have a shorter gap here and I could maybe just fit some angle iron in here to rest up against the frame, but there's too much of a gap. It's where I want it to be. It's sort of level with the front axle, level with this piece here, so I'm happy with the location. It provides a bit of a gap between the oil pan and the guard. Should something bend it, it's a bit of a distance before it actually hit the oil pan or the front drive shaft. So to provide some support, I have some 3/8 key stock that I'm gonna weld just like that. I have marked the back of all of them, so I just need to take this out, weld this on, then put it back, and then we'll drill the holes. So these 4 pieces of key stock are underneath the frame as I had intended. Now I'm curious as to, can I jack it up, lift the front end off, or will I bend it? Okay. Well, I guess we can't try that until we fasten these, because it's going to spread out. So for the mounting holes, they're going to be just 1 bolt each. I'm going to drill holes through. I'm going to tap this mounting plate is about a half, maybe 5/8 of an inch thick, so that'll take some doing. But I'm going to thread the plate that's colored orange. So I'll drill this out to the tap hole size, which is about 3/8 of an inch. I don't know exactly yet. And then I'll take the plate off, drill these holes a little bit bigger, tap those holes. So I've been going up about a 1/16 of an inch in diameter each time. The drill hole size for this 10mm bolt is 9mm. I don't have metric bits, but the closest I have is 23/64, which is slightly oversized. Because that plate is so thick, I'm not worried about the threads not holding well. So this is the 23/64. So this should be the last hole I drill through the frame. So with the holes drilled to size, I can take this guy down. He's gonna, those straps sort of hug the frame enough to keep it upright. It should slip down easy enough. So there are the holes, and two on the other side that look similar to those, just as round. So we'll tap those and then we'll pretty up that before we put it back on for good. I think that'll work fine. So that the bolts are easy enough to put in, I'm going to oversize these to a 7/16, which will give probably just under a 1/16 of an inch oversized compared to the size of the bolt. The last thing I'm going to do as far as metal work on here is knock off the corners, make it look a little bit better, and then I'll smooth up the edges of the file, and then finally prep it for paint. So basically ready for paint, except before I do that, I want to make sure that it's actually going to fit. There was one of these tabs, I can't remember, it might have been this one, that had a piece of MIG wire on here, so it's probably drilling a hole in not exactly the right spot. So if the other two on the other side fit as easy as that one did, then this is the one, and I'll probably elongate that hole a little bit to the top. So the plate is installed, it's bolted up. It looks good. I did put a piece of wood under there. I don't want to mar my newly painted primer. It's just primer. I'm not going to put a top coat on it. Just worried about rust, not looks. So interesting to see how much I can jack before it starts to do something it shouldn't. Either bring the front tires up, which it should, or bend the plate, which I'm hoping it doesn't. the tires are off the ground, but it did bend the plate a little bit. But I think it'll give the protection that I need. So I'm happy with that. So that part's done. So I think I'm decent with protection from underneath against stumps, rocks, occasional branches. Obviously I can still get stuff stuck in there. And stuff can wedge in there too, but as far as significant damage like hanging myself up on a rock, it's not going to puncture the fuel tank, it shouldn't hurt the hydraulic valves, and now it should not hurt my oil pan. So the next project is to figure out a way to mount my chainsaws. And what I've seen online and with scabbards, chainsaw scabbards you can buy online, they basically mount here. In fact, I really thought of buying one, but they're like $150 each. I already had these made. I just got to modify them. When I used my tractor in the woods before this year, I took my loader off and I mounted the chainsaws right there in that pinhole and that pinhole with these carriage bolts and big washers. So now what I'm going to do is put a piece of angle iron back here and just sandwich it here. I'll need a spacer there because it's going to rest up against this. Something like that. So I cut a piece of angle iron 14 inches long. I have another one. So it's going to sort of be a sandwich deal. I don't know if that's going to be too wide. I have a spacer here to make up the difference between that and this. I think that should be right. And I will have, yeah, there's enough room. Something like that. And then bolt the two together. That's my grand plan. So I'll fasten this guy and mark out where the angle line has to go. Just screwed with some GRK type screws. And I need a bigger clamp. So I'm just a little concerned about this edge because that's the furthest point out, catching me as I walk up and down. The only real option I have maybe is to move the whole scabbard this way, so if I bump up against something it's the edge of the wood and not this. I mean, I can round that obviously, but it still would hurt a lot more than a blunter piece of wood. Well, let me give that some thought. I got that where I want it. I did slide this in a little bit and this further back. The other thing I'm going to need is, rather than just resting on that, I'm going to rest on this and this. And that'll also help to secure this, because if I'm going to squeeze it here and here, I need to fasten this really well between the wood and the angle iron. Having it fastened on two sides will be very beneficial. So this needs to be mounted there. I'm going to use Gorilla Glue, so I have moistened both surfaces. So while that cures, figure out how to mount this guy. See if I have some carriage bolts. Probably is the best way. I did find a box of carriage bolts, 1/4 inch, but they're just the right length. I'm gonna drill 4 holes in this angle iron, then once those holes are drilled, then I'll drill through the wood, mount these, and probably the same thing here. I have some longer lag bolts as well, maybe a couple up there. So this is all clamped in position. I have the angle line here. I'm going to squeeze this. This will be the connecting point, and same over here. But over here I'm actually going to go through the wood because I do have enough room. Over here it's just going to be the metal. So for the metal, it's a 3/8 inch bolt, which is 7 inches long. And when I can go into the wood, I'll use a carriage bolt, which will have to be 8 inches long to make it over there. And they're 3/8 diameter, and I just happen to have a long 3/8 drill bit, which is convenient. I can do it with the regular bits, I'm sure, but this will just make it nice to drill both holes at once. But I would like to drill a pilot hole. Might be even though it'll be a bit cockeyed, I think the pilot hole will work on the second piece as well. If I can keep it from walking. Well, I think what I'm going to have to do is mark it, unclamp it, drill my pilot hole, and put it back out. And that's fine. And I actually can just mark it so it's the same location easily. Since I have it out, I might as well try to drill this pilot hole as well. So with this side, I'll have to figure out where the hole's going to go so it misses the framework here, the loader. And height-wise, roughly so. That'll work there. So before I bolt it together, I am gonna knock off the corner, probably just that corner there, because that this will probably be the narrowest point that I rub on. But if I have a loose clothing, so I'll knock that corner off, and that'll be easier to do when this is off, and then we'll mount it back on the tractor. You can see here I'm moving the loader frame and not the scabbard other than just up here. But that seems to be tight, so let's move on to the other side. So with this side, I did take the liberty of putting the piece of wood on the back already. So this one is a bit different. I'll see when I put the chainsaws in later, but it's at an angle pointing that way, basically to keep the top end of the chainsaw, the handle, back away, so it's not in my way when I get in and out. So this will be about like that, and just because of the nature of how this one is shaped, I don't think I'm gonna need the angle iron here like the other one, so I'm just gonna put this one back here, but I do have these hoses to deal with, so it's gonna squish their style a little bit. Really, there's a good wedge to keep them there. So this will be about like that. So I'm thinking with the carriage bolts, I'll just go directly from the plywood here. So I'm thinking maybe just below it. Yeah, I'd like to keep this as low as possible so I'm not reaching way up to put the chainsaw in. I could bring it down like that. Yeah, what I'm thinking I may have to do is put another block up here. If I put this down and I put the bolts up here, then it's going to want to suck it this way. So I'm going to have another block up there. So not a big deal. So I'm thinking about right just above it there. So what I want to do is make sure this hole's on the outside of this so that I don't interfere with this thing. So I can have that about there, and there, something like that. So I cut another block. This happens to be pressure treated. Not that I thought I needed it, but that's what I had available. So then the light, so about there. So this seems to work fine. So just like before, I'm gonna cut these edges off, round it up so it's a smooth edge. Same with over here. Underneath. So yeah, it doesn't even rest on this piece there. It's just on these 2 blocks of wood, which is fine. This here, look at that. It's shiny. What I had to do, because I couldn't thread a regular nut on here easily with this, this is galvanized, so I had to chase the threads with a die. I'm guessing these are meant for a galvanized nut, which might be slightly oversized. So they must just thread standard threads and then coat it with the zinc afterwards. So one last thing I want to do before I put the chainsaws in is replace this rest here. I made this a consumable piece. It should be easily removable. I think it's just 1.5 by 1.5, 2 screws. I made it consumable because that's where the spikes of the chainsaw rest, and obviously that eats away at it quite a bit. And you can see here the chain when I put that in, but it'll probably last quite a while. So let's replace these and then put the chainsaws in and see how they look. So that's why I angle it this way, because if I had this straight up, then this would be out here, and this entrance on the right side of the tractor is actually very narrow. So to give myself as much room as possible, that's how it's mounted. The spikes really dig into there. Let's do the other side. So, yeah, I think that's fine. Come down here. The last thing I want to do here, before this phase of my modifications are done, is to mount my toolbox right there. So these have all the parts, pieces, tools that I need for being in the woods, for the chainsaw, and my reading glasses. So I do have a wedge there for the stump, which hopefully I don't need now that I have the vise on the front of my tractor. Spare chain, my chainsaw wrench, files. So if I have this, I had kept those things not in that particular box because that's new here in this wooden box. So now the wooden box is just going to be my tool belt, which has my wedges and my hatchet. There's some extra ribbon, some other trash I don't need in there. But primarily my gas and my oil will go there. This is a hanger for my water bottle. You can see the hanger here for my snatch block, and the strap just hangs there. So my plan here is just to compensate for the curve in the fender, have it relatively level, which is about 2 inches, and whatever angle this is. So it took me a couple iterations to get the angle right. Ended up being 17 degrees. I started out, I think, at 13. So this is a piece which is 8 inches wide, 15 inches long. So I'm going to mount the plywood directly to the back. It'll rest on here. I think I'll just use some sort of wood screws to go in from the bottom. So as far as keeping the toolbox in place, I'm going to put a piece there and a couple pieces on the side. So I'm going to use some flathead wood screws for the back, and the 3/4 inches, which is that thickness, and for the front into this piece of softwood here, 1 5/8. So this will fit under there to drill, and I should be able to fit my drill under there with the bits to drive them in. We'll put a dab of grease on these holes to maybe prevent some rust from forming in those holes. Oh, I think these are number 8s. I have had issues, I think maybe at least with larger ones, with them, you know, going between the layers of plywood and spreading the plies apart. Let's hope that doesn't happen. We'll see. Yeah, for some reason, this bounces up and off. Bounces up and off. If for some reason this bounces up and off, then I can always figure out a way to put a simple ratchet strap or some sort of a bungee cord over here. But shouldn't be an issue as long as I'm not too aggressive driving the tractor. Oil, gas. Tape measures. Yes, I will put my glasses back in. Maybe I'll put a screw there to hang them. Otherwise, I'll just get stuff laid upon them. And hang that somewhere. So when I put this carriage bolt in, I noticed it might be close when I raised the front end loader as far as hitting the cylinder rod. You can see I lucked out. There's like an 1/8 of an inch clearance there. There is another hole. You can do that. That lifts it higher, but it reduces the lifting capacity. So I've always run it in the lower hole. But I'm glad I didn't have to modify that. So there were 2 logs that I noticed that I was walking out here that I forgot, some 16-footers that I just forgot to pick up. They were buried in the snow and I didn't notice them. One is here and one is on the way out. So there's no sense bringing the trailer in to just pick up 2 logs. So I'm just going to drag them out with my winch, and I will set them next to the pile of 16-footers, and it'll be a perfect opportunity to try out my new log pusher to see if it works. So, one little trial that seemed to work well. Anyhow, that'll wrap it up for this second part of this edition of Tractor Modifications. I appreciate you watching. Thank you.